The arrival on Veltrax 9, the transport shuttle landed on Veltrax 9 with a low hum. Steam rising from the landing pads as the doors hissed open. The planet's air was heavy with moisture, thick with the scent of alien trees and heat. Out of the mist stepped a single human, Corin Blake, tall, quiet, and dressed in worn Federation gear. He blinked against the twin suns and tightened the strap on his pack. Around him stood dozens of alien women, tall and muscular, their skin patterns like war paint. Their eyes glowed softly in shades of blue, red, and gold. Some laughed, some scoffed. One even pointed at Corin and said, "That one won't last till dusk." Veltrax 9 was ruled by female warriors known as the Viren. For generations they believed males were too weak to hold power or earn respect on this planet. Men existed only in stories or as failed experiments in the breeding chambers. No male had walked their land in over a century, not alive anyway. Corin said nothing. He simply followed the guard who gestured for him to move. She pushed a command pad, and the floor lit up beneath them. The ground moved, sliding like liquid metal until they reached a towering structure at the edge of the city Varela Spire. The heart of the warrior caste inside, Counselor Threx awaited. Her silver horns curled back from her head, and her robe shimmered with authority. "So, you are the gift from Earth," she said with a smirk. "One human male sent to impress us. Or maybe amuse us." Corin met her gaze calmly. "I'm not here to impress anyone," he said. "I'm here to learn and help." "If I can," laughter echoed in the chamber. "Help?" Threx scoffed. "You'll be lucky to survive your first rotation." She waved him off like a pet. "Put him in the servants' quarters. Let him clean the waste ducts. Let him feel what real work is before his spine breaks." Later that night, as Corin scrubbed dark metallic walls deep below the city, he watched machines flicker and hiss. He saw sparks, faulty wiring, and leaking coolant. Things the Viren ignored, believing only their strength mattered. But Corin was an engineer, trained to see what others didn't. When a cooling vent burst beside him, most would have panicked. But Corin calmly pulled open a maintenance panel, stripped wires from a nearby unit, and reconfigured the system to reroute the energy. The explosion stopped, the vent cooled, and the whole level stabilized. A nearby Viren guard had watched the entire thing. Her eyes widened as Corin stood, hands dirty but proud. "How did you know what to do?" she asked. Corin shrugged. "I fixed what needed fixing." She didn't speak. She simply turned and walked away, wordlessly. But her expression had changed. By morning, word had spread. The human male had saved the lower sector from a meltdown. Some called it luck. Others called it lies. But a few curious eyes began watching him closely. Counselor Threx summoned him again, this time with narrowed eyes. "Did someone help you?" she asked. "No," Corin replied. "Your systems are decades behind Earth standards. I just did what any tech would do." "Don't insult us," Threx snapped. "Our systems are sacred, passed down from the elders." Corin looked around the hall, pipes groaning and flickering above them. "Then maybe the elders need updating," he said. Gasps filled the room. One of the younger Viren warriors, Sarixa, stepped forward. She was tall even by their standards, with jagged tattoos across her arms and a long scar on her jaw. "You have guts, human," she said, circling him. "But do you have more than just words?" Corin didn't flinch. "Test me," Threx laughed. "Fine, he wants a test? Throw him into the arena at dusk. Let's see what your Earth instincts are really worth." That evening, as the twin moons rose, Corin stood in the arena, a pit surrounded by hundreds of cheering alien women. The sand was stained from past battles. The gates across from him rumbled. Something big was coming. A roar echoed through the pit, and a massive beast stepped forward, six-legged, armored, and furious. It was the Croxian hunter beast, bred for blood sport and execution. A punishment meant to break spirits. Corin didn't reach for a weapon. There wasn't one. Instead, he crouched, observing, watching the creature's movements, its breathing, and the shimmer near its ears. It was sensitive to sound frequencies. He pulled a small signal tuner from his pocket, a device he'd been tinkering with in the cleaning vents. He adjusted it quickly, aimed it toward the beast, and hit a tone. The beast froze, twitching, confused. Then it let out a low whimper and backed away. The crowd gasped. The beast turned, curled up in the sand, and laid down at Corin's feet like a docile pet. Silence overtook the arena. Even Threk stood without words. Serexa leaned over the balcony and whispered, "He just tamed a death beast." Corin looked up at the silent alien crowd and said only one thing. Maybe strength comes in different forms. That night, Veltrax 9 stopped laughing at the human male. Asterisk the challenge arena. Asterisk. They watched the beast kneel before the human, but none understood what it meant. To the Viren, power was always loud, roaring, brutal, and forceful, but Corin had shown them something new: silent control that terrified them more than they admitted. The next morning, Corin was pulled from his quarters before sunrise. He was escorted by 5 armored guards through echoing halls. Their spears were raised, not in fear, but in respect. They did not speak. They did not need to. The air inside the trial chamber was thick with heat and starlight. Dozens of Viren warriors stood in a circle, forming a living wall of muscle and tradition. At the center stood Counselor Threx, but beside her now stood Serexa, wearing a ceremonial harness and holding a crystal staff. "This is not punishment," Threx said loudly. "This is the trial of worth." A murmur rose from the crowd. Only a few males in Viren history had ever faced the trial, and none had passed. Most didn't even survive the first phase. It wasn't just combat. It tested instinct, intelligence, and resilience. It was designed to break minds before breaking bodies. Corin looked at the open arena, then at Serexa. "I didn't ask for this," he said calmly. Serexa stepped forward, her eyes locked on his. "No, you earned it," she said. "You scared them, Corin. Now prove their right to be afraid." The gong sounded, and the floor beneath him shimmered, shifting. Spires rose from the ground. Fire jets hissed, and shifting platforms spun at random speeds. It wasn't just a battlefield, it was alive. And Corin had 10 seconds to adapt. The first test was speed. A drone buzzed from above, firing small energy darts meant to sting and slow. Corin ducked, rolled, and grabbed a metal plate to use as a shield. The audience leaned forward, expecting failure. Instead, he sprinted toward a wall, kicked off, and grabbed a swinging bar mid-air. The next challenge was a memory wall. Dozens of glowing glyphs blinked in sequence. He had to match the exact order in reverse. Corin paused, breathing slowly. His memory clicked into action, pattern by pattern. He pressed the last glyph blue spiral. The wall opened. Serexa was watching closely, her jaw tense. "He's not just clever," she whispered. "He learns." The final trial activated 2 pillars with rotating arms, blades, and pressure sensors. They moved like dancing giants, faster and faster. Corin didn't charge them. He waited, observing the timing. He breathed in, counted silently, then burst forward like lightning. He slid under one blade, flipped over another, used a spinning arm as a launch pad, and landed with a perfect roll on the other side. The pillars stopped moving. The floor lights turned green. He had passed, but the test wasn't over. Serexa entered the ring, eyes glowing red from ceremonial energy. "Last phase," she said. "You and me." The crowd roared. Half of them didn't want Corin to make it this far. The other half were now unsure of everything they believed. She attacked first, fast and sharp. Her staff moved like a whip. Corin blocked, dodged, used minimal force. She pressed harder, sweat flicking from her arms. Each strike was meant to break bone or crush ribs, but Corin didn't fight back. He flowed around her. "Fight me," Serexa growled. "I'm not your enemy," Corin said, breath calm. "I don't need to beat you to prove myself." She froze for a heartbeat, confused. Her culture had never allowed such words from a male. But in that moment of stillness, Corin reached out, grabbed her staff mid-swing, and twisted it gently from her hands, then tossed it aside. He didn't keep the weapon, he didn't finish her. He just stood still and said, "I can win, but I choose not to hurt." That choice silenced the arena more than any victory scream ever could. Counselor Threck stepped forward, eyes narrow but voice even. The trial of worth has a new definition. Serexa stood beside Corin now, not in defeat, but in choice. She offered him her wrist, a Viren sign of mutual respect. He took it without hesitation. From that day, Corin was no longer the male from Earth. He became the first human ever accepted into the inner warrior circle of Veltrax 9. Temptation and test, asterisk in the deepest part of Veltrax 9's high citadel. The oldest doors opened for the first time in 100 years. These doors were carved with ancient markings, not in language but in warnings. Only the most elite warriors had entered this chamber and returned sane. Most who entered lost their minds, some their lives. No male had ever been invited inside, until now. Corin Blake stood before those very doors. His hands were scarred from the trial of worth, but his eyes were steady. Serexa walked beside him, her voice low. "They say this chamber was built by the first females to test if a mate had soul, not just strength. I'm not here to be anyone's mate." Corin said quietly, "You might not have a choice." Serexa replied, "But neither do I." The doors opened with a growl, and they stepped into darkness. The chamber sealed behind them, locking out all light and sound from the outside. The room came alive, walls shifted, air turned cold, and illusions formed in the shadows. It was called the Trial of the Flame Mirror, a test that created living reflections from one's deepest fears and desires. In the center of the chamber, a golden platform shimmered, surrounded by levitating orbs pulsing with emotion. "Choose one," Serexa said. "Each orb will show your truth. You must face it fully, or you fail." Corin stepped forward and touched the red orb. Fire exploded around him, not real, but hot enough to make him sweat. From the flames stepped a woman, his mother, crying, burning, blaming him. Then came soldiers who had died under his command, all accusing, reaching, pulling him into guilt. He knelt for a moment, shaking, but he didn't run. "I can't change the past," he whispered, "but I can change what comes next." The flames vanished, replaced with stillness. The orb turned clear. He had passed. Serexa watched in silence. She touched her own. Orba Blue won. Her trial showed her as a child, abandoned, scorned by older warriors, mocked for showing emotion, her own mother saying, "A soft warrior is no daughter of mine." Serexa's body tensed. She began to tremble, but then she felt a hand on her shoulder. Corin stood beside her, not saying a word, just sharing the weight. The vision cracked, then shattered. Their orbs turned gold. A door opened at the far end, leading them into a second chamber. Here, a different test awaited. A mechanical puzzle built into the floor. Tiles moved in complex rhythm, lasers firing in irregular patterns. The goal was simple: reach the center without dying. Serexa gritted her teeth. "I failed this test twice before." Corin examined the puzzle and smiled faintly. "It's not about speed, it's about rhythm and code. Watch this." He tossed a small pebble, watching how the tiles responded. He adjusted the tempo in his mind, then began to move, not fast but precise. Every step followed a pattern like a song. Serexa followed closely, trusting him. They reached the center unharmed. The chamber walls began to pulse. Symbols lit up, forming words neither of them recognized, but Corin's translator device hummed with meaning. Unity achieved, trial complete. Suddenly, a panel opened, and a pedestal rose from the ground. On it sat a glowing ring, no ordinary ornament. It was known in Viren legend as the bond mark, a sign of deep connection formed through trial and choice. It could only appear when two beings shared perfect harmony under pressure. Serexa stared at it, stunned. "This shouldn't be here, not for us, not for now." Corin looked at her carefully. "I'm not asking for anything," he said, "but we face this together. She nodded slowly, her voice barely a whisper. "We were meant to break apart, but we became stronger. He didn't touch the ring. She didn't either. Instead, they left it on the pedestal, a silent promise they would return if the time was right." When they exited the chamber, the guards stepped back in shock. The trial had taken only half the time it should have. The temple lights flickered, as if acknowledging something greater had just happened. Word spread quickly Corinne had completed a trial that once broke 10 seasoned warriors. And he had done it without violence, without pride, and without even touching the reward. The High Council began to worry. What kind of male doesn't chase power, but earns it anyway? Something ancient had shifted that day. The night of Fire Veil. At first, no one noticed the sky was bleeding. It started as a faint ripple across the twin moons. A strange shimmer that made the air buzz against the skin. The Viren called it the Fire Veil, a natural phenomenon so rare that most alive had never seen it. But those who had feared it, because when the Fire Veil passes over Veltrax 9, the temperature rises beyond control, instincts unravel, and even the strongest warriors become wild. It doesn't just heat the body, it heats the mind. That night, it arrived without warning. Corin was resting in his chamber when a high-pitched alarm echoed through the fortress, red lights flashed, and the walls shifted into emergency lockdown. The ceiling sealed above him, cutting off the sky. But the heat was already seeping in. Doors locked, escape impossible, the rooms cooling. Systems sputtered and died with a hiss. He touched the wall burning hot, sweat already dripping down his neck. His heart pounded not from panic, but from something deeper, primal, ancient. Across the fortress, the Viren were being sealed into safe rooms, but not everyone made it. In time, Syrexa was caught in the training hall, and her door jammed mid-lock. She pounded it shut with her bare hands, teeth clenched, skin glowing with heat. The Fire Veil had touched her, and it was changing her. Inside her veins, her warrior. Blood boiled, not with rage, but with a strange, overwhelming hunger. The Fire Veil didn't just test strength, it tested control. Viren females became hyper-aware, hypersensitive, and dangerously impulsive. She staggered down the corridor, searching for cold, for breath, for anything to fight the burning inside her. Then she smelled something different from smoke, different from molten metal. It was human, Corinne. She followed the scent like an animal, her eyes burning gold, her breath sharp. Her fists clenched as she reached his chamber door. The metal so hot it bent under her palm. She forced it open. Corin stood still, bathed in sweat. His shirt stuck to his back, and his skin shimmered from the heat, but his eyes were calm. "Syrexa," he said softly. "You're affected." Her breathing was wild, her body shaking. "I can't stop it," she growled. "It wants out, it wants to take, to touch, to tear." "Then let me help," Corinne said, walking toward her slowly. "But you have to fight it." "Not me." She stumbled back, confused. No male had ever spoken like that. Not to her, not during Fire Veil. They usually begged or broke. But Corin didn't fear her, he didn't even flinch. Instead, he reached for his satchel and pulled out a device made from scavenged parts. A cooling pack wrapped in metal plates. He placed it on the floor, activated it, and cold vapor burst into the air. A shield of cold mist surrounded them. Syrexa dropped to her knees inside the mist, gasping, the burning in her chest finally slowing. She looked up at him, not like a predator, but like someone pulled from the edge. "Why do you always do this?" She whispered. "Why don't you run from me?" "Because I see you," Corin said. "Not the fire, not the fury, just you." Her eyes welled with something no one expected from a Viren warrior, tears, not weakness but relief. They sat in silence as the mist cooled the room. As the Fire Veil raged outside, the walls groaned. The ceiling trembled, but inside that small circle of vapor, the human and the alien girl simply breathed together. When the Fire Veil passed, and the fortress opened again, Syrexa didn't speak to anyone for hours, but when she emerged, she was changed. She walked beside Corin without words, not as his protector, Not as his leader, but as something closer. The council took notice. Whispers started again. A human male had resisted the fire veil. A human male had calmed a Viren warrior in heat rage. Human male had built a cold system from junk and pure instinct. To the Viren, it was impossible. To Korin, it was survival. But to Serexa, it was the first time someone had seen her not as a weapon, but as a woman, and that truth would shake the foundation of their world. The council's ultimatum, asterisk in the Hall of Judgment. Ancient stone columns reached the clouds. Carvings of war goddesses lined the walls, each with her blade raised. Eyes forever watching. It was the place where destinies were written or destroyed. No outsider had ever stood there before, until today. Korin Blake stood in the center of the circle, surrounded by dozens of Viren elders. Their armor glinted with ceremonial symbols, their gazes cold and sharp. The chamber was silent but filled with danger. Counselor Threk spoke first, her voice like iron dragged across ice. "You have shaken the order of our world, human." Korin did not answer. "Not yet. Warriors hesitate now," Threx continued. "Our young question what was once sacred. A female warrior nearly bonded with a male, because of you, Serexa." Stepped forward, her voice calm but fierce. "No, counselor, I chose to stand with him. He did not make me weak. He helped me control what I almost lost to the fire veil." Threx raised her hand, silencing her. "Enough." She turned back to Korin. "You will either leave Veltrex 9 by the next rotation, or we will erase your presence by force." Gasps echoed across the circle, even among the elders. That was a threat reserved for war criminals, not guests. Korin finally stepped forward, calm but not afraid. "You fear what I represent, not who I am," he said. "I didn't come here to steal your power. I came to understand it, maybe even help." Another elder, Counselor Miana, narrowed her eyes. "Help us how?" "We have survived for centuries without human aid." Korin opened his pack and pulled out a small device. "Your sunstorms are increasing. Your birth rates are falling. Your energy systems are breaking down," he said. "You don't see it." "But I do." He activated the device, and a glowing projection hovered in the air maps. Readings, atmospheric data, all showing slow collapse. "This is from your own systems," Korin added. "I only helped it speak louder." The room fell. Silent, Serexa looked at the elders and said, "We call ourselves strong, but we ignore our own weaknesses. This human saw them, fixed them, and warned us. What does that make him?" "Dangerous," Threk said coldly. "No," Miana said slowly. "It makes him different." The debate raged for hours, but no clear judgment was given. The council broke into closed session, leaving Korin alone in the chamber with Serexa. She sat beside him on the floor, her armor removed, her shoulders bare. "They won't let you stay," she said softly. "Even if they know you're right." "Then I'll go," Korin replied. "But not without leaving something behind." He handed her a crystal chip, glowing faintly. "It's a design, a stabilizer that can reduce the sunstorm impact by 40%. "You built this?" she asked. "Half from your junk, half from my memories," he said with a small smile. "It might buy you time." She closed her hand around it, but didn't look up. "I don't want time, I want change." He gently touched her arm. "Then start it." Moments later, the doors opened and the council returned. Threk stood tall. "You will be escorted to the outer region by nightfall," she said. "You are not to return to Viren territory." "That is final," Korin nodded once. "Then I hope you use what I've given you. Even if you forget my name." He turned to leave, but Serexa stopped him. "Wait," she said. Stepping into the center, "I invoke the right of Shadow Guard." Every elder's head turned sharply. A warrior hadn't used that right in 100 years. "I will go with him," Serexa said, voice clear. "Where he walks, I will walk, until I understand the full measure of what he is." "You would leave everything?" Threx demanded. "No," Serexa said. "I would take everything I believe and test it against the truth." There were no cheers, no shouts, just silence. But in that silence, Something changed forever. The night of selection, every 50 cycles. Under the twin moons of Veltrax 9, the warriors of the Viren gathered beneath the Skyfire pillars for the most sacred ritual of their kind. The night of selection, it was not about combat, or blood, or territory. It was about choice, instinct, and legacy, and it had never, in all of Viren history, involved a human male, until now. Drums pounded through the stone valley, lighting up the night with flame and rhythm. Female warriors wore armor laced with tribal feathers and glowing runes. They marched in lines proud and wild. Each had the right to select a partner for the sacred bond, a rare merging of strength and blood, to preserve their lineage. Korin stood at the edge of the ceremony, not invited, but not stopped either. His clothes were plain, his stance humble. But every eye still found him, some with hate, some with confusion, and some with wonder. Syrixa stood among the warriors, her tattoos freshly inked, her face painted not in red, but in silver, the mark of a warrior uncertain. Her gaze never left him. Counselor Threk stepped onto the stone platform, raising the ceremonial staff. "Tonight we choose," she declared. "Our strongest carry our future. Our future chooses who walks beside them, one by one." Warrior females walked into the ring, pointed at males from the outer clans, and made their claim. But when Syrixa stepped forward, the crowd held its breath. She didn't point to any Viren male. She didn't choose from her own caste. Instead, she walked slowly across the ring toward the edge. Toward the outsider, toward Korin. Gasps, angered cries, whispers had all swirled around them like a storm. But Syrixa did not stop. She reached Korin, took his hand, and raised it above her head. "I choose him," she said loudly. "The one who walks with peace, but fights with truth. The one who does not seek to rule, but dares to care." Silence. Then Threx's voice cut through the quiet like lightning. "He cannot accept. He is not of our blood, not of our way." Korin stepped forward, gently lowering Syrix's hand, and turned it toward the council. "You're right," he said. "I'm not of your blood. But if choice means anything tonight, then let her choose freely, without fear, without chains." He turned to Syrixa, looking into her eyes. "I accept if your choice is yours, not anyone else's." For the first time in living memory, a warrior female didn't just choose, she was asked if she wanted to be chosen too. Syrixa smiled, something raw and real behind her usually cold eyes. "It is mine," she said, "every part of it." A new symbol formed in the firelight above them, gold merging with silver. Old tradition bending, not breaking. Some warriors turned their backs in protest, but others stepped forward, touching their blades to the earth in silent support. Korin didn't know what he had just started, but the Viren knew. A ripple had been born, one that would one day become a wave. The human bond asterisk. The stars above Veltrax 9 were not still that night. They shimmered like sparks on water, as if the galaxy itself had paused to witness what no one thought possible. A human and a warrior of the Viren had formed a bond without blood, without conquest, without command, and that changed everything, far beyond the city walls. Rumors traveled faster than light, across allied planets and enemy systems. They whispered of a human who walked beside fire-hearted females and was not burned. They whispered of a warrior who bent no knee, but chose to stand equal. The High Council was split. Some called it heresy, others called it evolution. Counselor Miana stood before the elders and said, "We have spent centuries proving strength, but now we must ask strength for what?" Meanwhile, Korin and Syrixa had left the fortress, not in exile but in purpose. They traveled to the shattered borderlands where sunstorms grew worse every cycle. Their mission was simple: protect the dying outposts and test Korin's stabilizer. Tech, what began as a small effort became something bigger. Day by day, more warriors joined them. Some out of curiosity, others out of belief. They built shields powered by Korin's designs, fused with Viren energy crystals. The skies cooled, crops returned, birth rates began to climb again. But not all were pleased. A rival caste, the Draxan Fangs, believed tradition must be preserved through blood. They attacked one of the outer camps at dawn, firebombs raining down on sleeping tents. Women and children screamed, structures collapsed, and warriors scattered. Corin ran into the flames. He pulled 3 younglings from rubble, carried a wounded elder on his back, and shielded Serixa with his own body when a blast hit. When the smoke cleared, he was covered in burns, but alive, and the camp was still standing. That moment was caught on a drone's lens and broadcast across the stars. The image of a human bleeding but smiling, holding the hand of a trembling alien girl, broke every lie they were told about his kind. The council could not deny it anymore. They summoned Corinne and Serixa back to the Hall of Judgment, but this time, they did not stand at the center as outcasts. They stood as founders of something new. Counselor Threx, once his greatest opponent, stepped forward and bowed her head. You did what none of us could. You healed not just the land but us. Corinne shook his head. I didn't heal anyone, he said softly. You did that when you chose to stop fearing change. Serixa turned to the crowd of warriors gathered behind them. From this day forward, let no one say that love, loyalty, or courage belongs to only one kind. And with those words, the old laws were rewritten. The Viren archives marked a new era, the first bond. It was not a treaty, not a rule, it was a reminder that strength was not about who could break the hardest. It was about who could build when others had fallen. Corin and Serixa continued to travel, not as legend but as living proof. They built bridges where walls stood. They raised peace where war once grew. And as for the Viren girls who once laughed at the idea that a single male could ever handle them, now they taught their daughters a different lesson. Sometimes, it takes only one human to show the galaxy what true strength really looks like.